Based on what you just said, are the migrants aware of the dangers when they embark on trips like this?
Yes and no, and I will explain what I mean by that. Yes, because some of them know that, they listen to the news and they know that people die from the that, but it's an issue about the devil and the deep blue sea. They don't have anything, they have nothing to live for where they are. Say, for example, people that have been dispersed in northern Nigeria as a result of the Boko Haram crisis, they will leave that area at all costs. So if somebody comes to them and tell them that, okay, I can get you into Europe, they are more likely to make that journey onto Libya, over the Mediterranean Sea, and go to Europe. So there is more danger in not migrating, basically. And on the other side, which is no, sometimes we have people smuggler around the world who will buy a big ship, and they make a lot of money from it. And they will tell people and promise people of a better life in Europe. So some would say that, if you get into Europe, all you need to do is to claim asylum, and you'll be able to get your papers, and you'll be able to live in Europe and bring your family over. So that is often the situation that happens not only in Nigeria, but around the world.
Now, since you was want to look at things from home now, has the system right here at home in Nigeria contributed in any way to the rise in illegal migration?
Um, yes, because people are part of the system. You cannot isolate people away from the system. People, human beings, live in a system. And human beings in Nigeria live in Nigeria under the governance of the Nigerian system. So what happens is, okay, we are witnessing the Boko Haram crisis in the north. So that's is a conflict, is becoming global. We have issue of poverty. We have issue of bad governance. We have issue of corruption. All these factors affect people's lives directly or indirectly. So we have high poverty, and people often, want to go to Europe, especially to America, and want to seek better life. So the system in Nigeria, yes, it does hate illegal migration.
Now, I'd like to also ask you, based on what you've experienced, if the host countries, that's the destination countries, have a right to reject those who are coming into their country illegally, especially these migrants that we see that engage in these trips via sea and all, do they have the right to reject these immigrants?
Um, Not really. It depends on a lot of the immigrants, some of them have been coached, and they will say they will seek asylum. And there is an international treaty, there is an international law that you have to process everyone that seek refuge. So the issue there is the government, if anybody goes into a Western country, because that's the country a lot of people do travel to. When people go to Europe, go to America, or go to any part of the world, under international law, the country needs to accept the person or the people, immediately they claim asylum. So now what happens is that when people come in, they claim asylum, the country has to process them first before now deciding whether or not the application is genuine. So in that process, some asylum cases takes about 6 years. I have experience about the UK. It could take up to 6 years to process. And by that time, the people are settled in the community, in the country where they have migrated to. So, and if the asylum is being denied, it takes another legal process to be able to deport them back to their home country. So that's often the situation that does happen.
Now, finally, before I let you go, what can be done by countries to reduce fatal incidents like that which occurred in Italy on Monday to the barest minimum, even if we cannot eliminate it completely?
Okay. I think what should happen, in my own personal view, is that there needs to be stepping up of international diplomacy. Conflict should be resolved around the world without necessarily going into military action. Then there must be a global redistribution of wealth. So rich countries should support, or developed countries should support developing countries in order to be able to develop policies that will be implemented to make sure that the less developed country also grows. Actually, in a matter of fact, people do not like to migrate. People migrate as a result of hardship, as a result of poverty, as a result of conflicts. So what we need to do, if we eradicate all these points that enable people that makes people want to migrate to seek better life, then we will see a reduction. Then on the less favorable, on the less I would say good note, global conflict has always been in existence in human history. So at every point in time in human history, you can study the law since human existence, there's always been conflict at one point or the other. So, and people will always want to migrate to safeguard themselves from harm. So diplomacy is often international diplomacy and foreign policies to ensure that there is relative peace across the world. That is how countries can try as much as possible to reduce illegal migration.
Well, Mr. Olumide Adeomi, thank you so much for speaking with us. We've been talking to a senior immigration lawyer for law and visas, Mr. Olumide Adeomi. He's been telling us more about illegal migration. Now, as the war on terror continues in various parts of the world, Libyan special forces have succeeded in retaking the main military base in Benghazi from Islamist fighters that they've been battling since October. The battle is only part of a wider struggle for 4 years after the ousting of autocrat Muammar Gaddafi. The Special Forces commander, Wanis Bukamanda, said his troops had seized the army camp on a road to the airport outside of Libya's second biggest city, as well as nearby offices belonging to state cell phone operator Al Madar. Backed by troops led by General Khalifa Haftar, Special Forces launched their offensive against Islamists in the city in mid-October, aiming to retake the city seized by Islamists last summer. They have regained control of central parts of the city and the airport, as well as several military camps. But there was no end to heavy fighting near Benghazi's port residence. The port, which is the main gateway for food imports, has had to close as a result. Army forces in eastern Libya, including Benghazi, are loyal to the internationally recognized Prime Minister Abdullah Al-Thani, who had to flee the capital Tripoli in August after a rival faction seized it. Now, I think we've been able to, I'm being told we're not able to connect with the communications officer for UN World Food Program in South Sudan, who was supposed to be shedding more light on this. But there's some good news coming from South Africa right now, as operations at Simbaye Gold's Beatrix mine has resumed after a land war between opposing unions forced the mine to close for 2 days. Unions agreed to stop any acts of violence after 9 mine workers were injured on Thursday, following clashes between the National Union of Mine Workers and the Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union. The gold producer estimated that the work stoppage had cost it 11.5 million rand, and that's about 993,000 US dollars, or 25 kilograms of gold per day, which it hoped to recover in the course of the year. The violence raised concerns that it would spark fresh unrest ahead of wage talks in the gold sector later this year. Simbaye said the fighting erupted because AMCU, which represents 30% of the workforce, claimed it was the majority union. Tens of thousands of former NUM members have been poached by AMCU on the Platinum Belt in a turf war that flared in 2012 and has spread into the gold sector. The communications officer for the UN World Food Program in South Sudan, that's George Fomeyer, and he joins us now live via telephone. George, thank you so much for speaking with us on Network Africa.
It's my pleasure. Thanks very much for having me on.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to start by asking you why the food challenge, well, about the challenges experienced by the United Nations World Food Programme as regards South Sudan.
Just know that a year of fighting has forced almost 2 million people from their homes. It has damaged farming and trade and devastated people's lives. A huge humanitarian effort helped to stave off a potential famine. But 2.5 million people started 2015 unsure where their next meal is coming from. So it is vital to sustain the relief effort to avoid a hunger catastrophe in 2015 here in South Sudan.
Now, how can these challenges be addressed? What's the best way?
You know, the acute hunger crisis facing South Sudan is what many think is man-made. It is critical for the guns to fall silent. South Sudan needs peace to allow displaced people and refugees to return home and resume their livelihoods. So that is a key thing. And of course, we need sustained humanitarian assistance. This includes food assistance so that we are able to ensure that people can be able to live their lives.
Now, I'm rounding up by asking you this, George. Would you say that the food situation is getting better or is it getting worse compared with how things started at the beginning of the South Sudan crisis?
Well, I would say that we went into it was in phases. When the fighting started, it disrupted people's livelihoods, which meant that a lot of people were unable to go to their farms to grow crops the way they would normally do. And so we had a situation where the fighting led to us being at the brink of a hunger catastrophe. It kind of improved, but then we are seeing and we are projecting that if we do not have a consistent and sustained humanitarian effort, and if the fighting does not stop to allow people to be able to resume their livelihoods as normal, then we are going to face, then lots of people are going to face a crisis situation. That's the clarion call that we're making. We're urging the parties to the conflict to put the needs and aspirations of the South Sudanese people above all other interests and expedite the peace situation so that people can get back to their lives.
George, thank you so much for speaking with us on Network Africa. We really appreciate your time. Thank you. Well, I've been speaking with George Formia. He is the Communications Officer for the United Nations World Food Programme in South Sudan. Thank you so much for watching Network Africa. I'm Cynthia Are.